hearing in January, you said under oath, and I quote, "There will be no politicization at the FBI. There will be no retributive actions taken by the FBI should I be confirmed." And in your written response to the Senate question,
that promise is on video. It's on the congressional record. And it was made by the one man who would go on to break it, in his own words, measured against his own standard. This isn't a story about what critics say Kash Patel did. It's a story about what Kash Patel said he would never do, followed by what the record shows happened next. Over the next several minutes, we're going to lay both of those side by side, in order, and let you draw the conclusion. On a Wednesday afternoon in a House hearing room, Representative Deborah Ross did something almost nobody else questioning Patel had tried. She didn't bring new accusations. She brought his own words back to him, one at a time, and asked him to explain the gap. Kash Patel was confirmed as FBI Director on February 20, 2025, by a Senate vote of 51 to 49. Every Democrat voted no. 2 Republicans, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, crossed party lines to vote no as well. During his hearing, senators pressed him on whether he could separate personal loyalty from institutional duty, and Patel's answer, repeatedly, was some version of the promise you just heard. He also submitted that promise in writing. As part of his official Senate questionnaire, months before this hearing, Patel put it on paper.
And in your written response to the Senate questionnaire, you said, I quote, "Personnel decisions shall be based on performance and adherence to the law, and every FBI employee will be held to the absolute same standard, and no one will be terminated for case assignments." So I want to just go through a couple.
That's not campaign rhetoric. That's a sworn answer, submitted in writing, as part of the official confirmation record the Senate used to decide whether to hand this man control of 38,000 employees and 400 field offices. Here's what the public record shows happened next. A week before Donald Trump's second inauguration, FBI Special Agent Brian Driscoll was offered the number 2 position at the Bureau. Driscoll wasn't a political figure. He held the FBI Medal of Valor and the Shield of Bravery, had commanded the hostage rescue team, and had spent nearly 2 decades in federal law enforcement. According to Driscoll's own account, given in a CNN interview, incoming officials asked him during vetting who he'd voted for in 2024, when he began supporting Trump, and whether he'd donated to the Democratic Party. Driscoll says Patel told him directly that his position wouldn't be a problem, so long as he wasn't active on social media, hadn't donated to Democrats, and hadn't voted for Kamala Harris. To be clear about what that is, it's an allegation from a named, on-the-record source, not an admission from Patel himself, and it hasn't been independently corroborated by a second witness. It matters here because of what happens later in this same hearing. Driscoll was fired without public explanation in August 2025. A month later, he filed suit, alongside 2 other former officials, against Patel, the FBI, and the Department of Justice. The Justice Department has moved to dismiss that case. It remains pending in federal court.
FBI agents, analysts, and supervisors from only one political party being politicization of the FBI or making personnel decisions based on performance and adherence to the law.
We don't ask FBI people, applicants, where their political parties are.
Mr. Patel, do you ask FBI applicants who they voted for?
The FBI does not.
Listen to that answer again. Not no. Not never. Patel began his sentence with, "We do," and only corrected himself mid-word to, "The FBI does not." A single slipped pronoun would mean very little on its own. In this context, following a written promise that personnel decisions would be based on performance and law, and following a documented account from a decorated former acting director describing exactly that kind of political vetting, the slip lands differently. It doesn't prove intent. It does line up, precisely, with the pattern already on the record. Ross didn't stop at the slip. She moved to specifics, 3 names, 3 cases, each one testing a different part of Patel's original promise. The first was Driscoll, whose story you already know. The second was Steve Jensen, a career agent with a background in terrorism and counterintelligence work, tied to investigations connected to January 6. Jensen is a named plaintiff alongside Driscoll in that same pending lawsuit, and online pressure from parts of Patel's political base specifically targeted him by name in the weeks before his termination. The third name carries the most human weight. According to testimony raised in this hearing, a third fired agent had a wife who was gravely ill with cancer at the time of his termination, and a colleague personally appealed to Patel to delay the firing on humanitarian grounds. That request was reportedly denied. We're flagging that detail clearly. It comes from testimony in this hearing, not from independent outside reporting, so treat it as an allegation, not a confirmed fact, until it's corroborated further. If the terminations were simply about performance, as Patel's written questionnaire promised, there'd be no need for any further explanation. Patel gave one anyway, in this same hearing, without being pushed into it.
And when President Trump appointed me to be the FBI director, he said, Kash, you got a mandate to do two things: crush violent crime and defend the homeland, and also level the institution that has become the weaponization of law enforcement in this country.
Read that sentence carefully, because Patel isn't being accused of anything here. He's describing his own mandate, in his own words, voluntarily, on the congressional record. Level the institution isn't a phrase about case performance. It's a phrase about restructuring based on a political judgment of the agency's past conduct. Whether that restructuring was justified is a separate question from whether it matches the written promise that personnel decisions would rest solely on performance and adherence to law. Those two statements, both from Patel, don't sit easily next to each other. There's important context worth knowing here too. Some fired agents, following legal action, have already been reinstated with back pay, an outcome that typically doesn't happen when terminations were clean, performance-based decisions with no legal exposure attached. Separate reporting has also alleged that this restructuring affected a counterintelligence team tracking Iranian threats, in the days before a major U.S. military strike. That claim comes from outside reporting, not this hearing, and hasn't been confirmed through official bureau statements, so we're labeling it clearly as unverified. In June of this year, Representative Jamie Raskin also sent a formal letter alleging Patel authorized cash bonuses to loyal staff exceeding federal pay caps. That's an allegation in a congressional letter, not a finding from a court or inspector general, and it remains unverified as of this recording. None of these three items alone would justify a strong conclusion. Together, layered on top of the Driscoll lawsuit and the written record already covered, they form a pattern that multiple independent sources, using different methods, keep describing the same way.
That Mr. Driscoll filed against you and the FBI, he was asked who he voted for?
Since that lawsuit has been filed that's ongoing litigation, I'm not able to comment.
Well, but it also means that you just said that what happened in his situation didn't happen. So we will go on to the next question.
Sit with that exchange for a moment, because it's the entire hearing compressed into 3 lines. Patel had already, earlier in the same hearing, characterized the allegations around political vetting as false or overstated. Ross then pointed directly to the specific allegation at the center of active litigation, the exact claim Patel had just dismissed, and asked him to reconcile the two positions. Invoking ongoing litigation is a standard, often legitimate response for any official facing active legal claims. It isn't, by itself, evidence of guilt. What makes this instance different is the sequencing. He'd already spoken about the substance of the allegation moments earlier, before invoking litigation as a reason not to comment on that same substance. You can't characterize a claim as untrue and then decline to discuss it because it's under litigation, without the sequence itself becoming part of the story. This case sits inside a real legal gray zone, and it's worth understanding why Driscoll's lawsuit hasn't simply been thrown out. Federal law enforcement officials generally serve at the pleasure of the president, which gives an administration-wide latitude to reassign or dismiss senior officials. What the law doesn't clearly permit is termination based specifically on protected political activity, which is the exact claim at the center of this case. Patel isn't the first FBI director whose independence has come under public scrutiny either. Trump fired Director James Comey in 2017. His successor, Christopher Wray, was pressured out before the end of his term as Trump's second administration began. Legal scholars have repeatedly flagged this as a broader question about the FBI's institutional independence, regardless of which party holds the White House.
It's not adherence to the law. Thank you, and I yield back.
Here's what actually holds up, without speculation, at the end of this hearing. Kash Patel promised, in writing and under oath, that personnel decisions would rest on performance and law alone, and that no one would be terminated for case assignments. A named, decorated former acting director has testified, under his own name, that he was asked about his voting history during vetting for a senior position. That same official was later terminated and is now suing Patel directly over it, in a case the Justice Department has tried, so far unsuccessfully, to have dismissed. In the same hearing where he defended his record, Patel described his own mandate as including a directive to level the institution, a phrase that doesn't match a standard built purely on performance. And when directly confronted with the specific legal claim at the center of that lawsuit, he declined to reconcile it with what he'd just said moments earlier. None of that requires outside speculation to be significant. It requires only reading Patel's own words next to each other, in order, which is exactly what happened in that hearing room, and exactly what we've done here. Whether this pattern reflects a genuine, defensible restructuring of a flawed institution, or something closer to what Driscoll's lawsuit alleges, is now a question sitting in front of a federal judge, not a talk show panel. You have what he said. You have what happened next. The gap between them is yours to judge. If you want to understand how this connects to the broader pattern inside Patel's FBI, including the polygraph testing of senior staff and the Senate hearing where his own credibility was directly challenged, we've covered that in a separate breakdown. Subscribe to AVA Reports for coverage that separates fact from allegation, every single time. We'll keep tracking this story as the lawsuit moves forward. Thanks for watching.